The scream echoed down the hallway on the 47th floor, breaking the silence of the night. James Anderson dropped his coffee cup, staining the imported carpet as he ran toward the sound. A cleaning staff member lay on the floor, crying, while a well-dressed executive in an expensive suit stared down at her with disdain. "You're fired," he shouted. "I can't stand your incompetence anymore. Go back to your country." James froze as he turned the corner, witnessing the scene. The woman, no older than 40, trembled as she tried to stand, a coffee stain on her uniform revealing the origin of the conflict. The executive continued his stream of insults, each word dripping with prejudice and arrogance. At 50 years old, James Anderson had built an empire. Anderson Enterprises was his life, his legacy, a tech giant built from the ground up with the promise of being different, of creating opportunities for all. But in that moment, watching the scene unfold before him, he felt as though everything he had built was a lie. "What's going on here?" His voice thundered through the hallway. The executive turned around, startled to see the CEO of the company at that hour. His face shifted from red with anger to pale with fear in mere seconds. "And Mr. Anderson, I was just dealing with an issue of incompetence." "Name?" James demanded, his voice sharp as steel. "William Harris, sir. Vice President of Operations." James approached the cleaning lady, still trembling, and extended his hand to help her up. "And what's your name?" "Maria, sir," she replied quietly, her accent betraying her Latin heritage. "I'm sorry for the accident. I didn't see Mr. Harris turning the corner." "Don't apologize," James interrupted gently. He then turned to Harris, his dark eyes flashing with restrained anger. "You're suspended until further notice, Mr. Harris. Report to HR first thing tomorrow morning." The executive paled even further. "But sir, she..." "Now?" The word cut through the air like a whip. After Harris hurriedly left, James helped Maria regain her composure and made sure she received medical attention, as she had been injured in the fall. But as he walked back to his office, an unsettling feeling consumed him. If this was happening on the executive floor, what else was going on in the other 46 floors below him? On his desk, a brown envelope awaited him. No return address, just his name typed in simple font. Inside, dozens of reports similar to the one he had just witnessed. Discrimination, harassment, abuse of power. A toxic culture that had seeped into his company like a silent cancer. James loosened his Italian tie and collapsed into his leather chair. The city lights shimmered through the office windows, casting shadows that danced on the walls. On one of them, a picture frame caught his attention. His parents, an interracial couple who faced all kinds of prejudice in the 60s just to be together. "Forgive me," he whispered to the photo. "I failed you." His father, a black man who started as a janitor and ended up owning a small repair shop, always said that true power lay in making a difference in others' lives. His mother, the daughter of Irish immigrants, taught him that every human being deserved respect and dignity. Anderson Enterprises had been born from those values, or it should have been. The next morning, James called an urgent meeting with Emily, his executive assistant of 15 years, and Rachel Thompson, the director of human resources. "Cancel all my appointments for the next 2 weeks," he instructed Emily, who looked at him in shock. "2 weeks? But sir, we have the board meeting, the new project launch." "All of that can wait," he interrupted, his voice carrying a determination that left no room for argument. "Rachel, I need you to create a new identity for me in the system." "Michael Turner, night shift security." The two women exchanged confused glances. Rachel was the first to speak up. "Mr. Anderson, I don't understand." James slid the brown envelope across the table. "Read." For 20 minutes, the only sound in the room was the rustling of paper and occasional gasps of horror. When they finished, both women had tears in their eyes. "Some of these cases passed through my desk," Rachel admitted, her voice trembling. "But there was always pressure to file them away, always a lack of concrete evidence. That's why I need to see it with my own eyes," James explained. "I need to understand how we got to this point. And there's only one way to do that, by living the reality of the employees at the bottom of the pyramid." Emily, who knew James better than anyone, recognized the shift in his eyes, the same determination that had guided him when he built the company from scratch. "It will be dangerous," she warned. "If they find out?" "It's a risk I need to take," he replied, standing to look out the window. "I built this company promising it would be different, that everyone here would have equal opportunities. If that's become a lie, I need to fix it." Rachel began working on the details of the new identity while Emily reorganized the schedule. James took the opportunity to observe the movement in the building across the street. Executives in expensive suits coming and going, luxury cars parked in front, all the shine and power he too represented. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Not all kings should know the secrets of their castles, Mr. Anderson. Some truths are too dangerous. Think carefully before trading your crown for a security uniform. A chill ran down his spine. Someone knew about his plans. Someone with close enough access to have overheard the conversation or seen the preparations. The veiled threat in the message only confirmed his suspicions. The problem was much deeper than he had imagined. Emily, he called, his voice darker than usual. Also prepare a false identity for a delivery driver. I think I'll need more than one disguise to uncover the whole truth. That night, while organizing the final details, James picked up the framed photo of his parents once again. I'll fix this, he promised quietly. Even if it's the last thing I do as CEO of this company. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with hues of red and orange. Soon, James Anderson, the powerful CEO of Anderson Enterprises, would disappear for 2 weeks. In his place, Michael Turner, a simple night security guard, would start unraveling the dark secrets hidden in the company's halls. The king was about to leave his throne, not out of weakness but out of strength. Because sometimes to save a kingdom, the king must blend in with his subjects and face the shadows that grow far from his eyes. The transformation would begin on Monday. And with it, a journey that would forever change not only Anderson Enterprises but James Anderson himself. The first night as Michael Turner began with a transformation. In the bathroom of a hotel near the company, James Anderson studied his reflection as he got ready. His $10,000 Italian suit was replaced with a dark blue security uniform. His Italian shoes were swapped for sturdy black boots. A fake mustache and simple frame glasses completed the disguise. Michael Turner, 45 years old, ex-military, divorced, he murmured to himself, reviewing his new identity. Rachel had created a convincing background, military service, some previous security jobs, references that could be verified through numbers that actually belonged to trusted company employees. The shift started at 10 p.m. James arrived 20 minutes early, blending in naturally with the other employees arriving for the night shift. In the ground floor security room, a burly middle-aged man was waiting for him. Turner? I'm Frank Miller, night security supervisor. He introduced himself, barely glancing at the paper in his hands. First night is always on the monitor. Learn the cameras, memorize the blind spots. And don't fall asleep because I'll know. The monitoring room was small and poorly ventilated. Dozens of screens showed different angles of the building from the garage to the rooftops. James, now Michael, sat next to another security guard, a young black man who introduced himself as Kevin. First night is always the worst, Kevin muttered quietly. But you'll get the hang of it. Just be careful with the people on the 35th floor, they're the real problem. Why? James asked, genuinely curious. Finance department. They think they own the place. They're always staying late, demanding coffee, treating us like servants. And God help you if you don't obey right away. In the following hours, James observed the nightly activity of his own company with new eyes. He saw the cleaning staff working exhausted, some on double shifts. He noticed how certain executives treated these workers with disdain, some not even bothering to look them in the eye. Around midnight, an incident caught his attention. On the monitor showing the 35th floor, an executive was yelling at a cleaning lady. We need to check this out, James said, standing up. Kevin grabbed his arm. It's not worth it, man. Sarah Thompson does this all the time. We've lost 3 employees because of her. If we interfere, it's our heads that roll. Sarah Thompson? The name caused a knot in James' stomach. She was one of the company's most awarded executives, known for her aggressive goals and impressive results. Ignoring Kevin's warning, James took the elevator to the 35th floor. When the doors opened, the scene was even worse than it appeared on the cameras. Sarah, in her immaculate suit, was pointing a finger at a woman in her 60s who was visibly trembling. You're not even good enough to clean floors. How did you get this job? You must have forged your documents, you... Excuse me, James interrupted, his voice firm but controlled. Is there a problem here? Sarah turned, irritated by the interruption. Her eyes flared when she saw his security uniform. A problem? Yes, there's a problem. This incompetent woman spilled water near my computer. She could have caused an accident. James looked at the floor. A small bucket of water had tipped over, but it was far from any electronics. The cleaning lady, whom he now saw was named Rosa by her badge, was trying to explain in broken Portuguese that she was just doing her job. Miss Thompson, he said, staying calm, there's no risk to the equipment. And yelling at employees goes against company policy? Who do you think you are? Sarah took a step toward him. Do you know how much money I bring into this company? You're just security. What's your name? I'll make sure you're fired today. Michael Turner, ma'am. And I'm just following the procedures. Sarah grabbed her phone, typing furiously. Let's see what your supervisor thinks about this. And as for you, she turned to Rosa, you're fired. James' heart sank. As CEO, he had promoted Sarah 3 times, impressed by her results. How many situations like this had been hidden from him? How many lives had been ruined in the name of profit? Miss Thompson, his voice came out deeper than he intended, you don't have the authority to fire cleaning staff. This needs to go through HR. Oh, I do. You have no idea who you're talking to? Actually, it's you who doesn't know, James thought, but he kept his security posture. Instead, he helped Rosa gather her belongings and escorted her to the elevator. On the way back to the monitoring room, Rosa held back tears. Thank you, sir, she said in her thick Portuguese accent. I really need this job. I have grandchildren. James felt a lump in his throat. Don't worry, Mrs. Rosa. No one is getting fired today. Back in the monitoring room, Kevin watched him with a mixture of admiration and concern. Man, you've got guts. But you just made a powerful enemy. Sometimes you have to face power to do what's right, James replied, thinking about how he never imagined his own company could become a place where good people feared doing the right thing. The rest of the night was quieter, but James could barely focus. His mind was processing everything he had witnessed in just a few hours. Sarah Thompson's behavior wasn't an isolated case. It was a symptom of something much deeper and more disturbing. At 6 a.m., when his shift ended, James waited for everyone to leave before making a call. Emily? I need you to do something. Look up all the termination records and complaints involving Sarah Thompson over the last 3 years. And don't let anyone know you're investigating. As he walked to his hotel, James watched the morning shift employees arrive. Executives in their luxury cars, completely ignoring the workers who were arriving by bus or on foot. 2 different worlds coexisting in the same space, separated by an abyss of power and privilege. His phone vibrated, another message from the unknown number. Interesting first night, Mr. Anderson? But be careful, some dragons shouldn't be provoked. Ask the last person who tried to report Sarah Thompson. James stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, feeling a chill run down his spine. Who was sending these messages? And more importantly, what had happened to the person who tried to report Sarah before? The answer to these questions promised to be even more disturbing than his first night as security. But James Anderson was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The sun had barely risen when James put on his second disguise. The delivery uniform and the worn cap created a very different image from the CEO who used to command the top floor of the building. In front of the mirror in the small hotel room, he practiced a slouched posture, a more tired walk. The details that would make the difference between being discovered or going unnoticed. His phone vibrated with a message from Emily. Preliminary reports on Sarah Thompson are in. 17 employees have resigned in the last 8 months. All cited personal reasons. All were minorities. James felt his stomach churn. 17 lives affected, 17 families impacted, and he never knew. Or maybe he bitterly thought he never wanted to know. In the lobby of the building, he blended in easily with the other delivery workers. It was surprising how no one really looked at them. Executives rushed by, some bumping into him without apologizing, others speaking loudly on the phone as if they were alone in the space. It was then that he overheard an argument near the reception. Robert Mitchell, the legal director, was gesturing furiously while speaking with Sarah Thompson and 2 other executives James recognized as Thomas Blake and Victoria Hayes from the finance department. That old woman can't sue us, Mitchell spat, his normally pale face now red with anger. She's an immigrant, for God's sake. Who's going to believe her? I received a preliminary notice this morning, Sarah replied, her voice cold and calculating. She's claiming harassment and discrimination. Apparently, that idiot security guard encouraged her. James moved closer to the delivery desk, pretending to organize packages while straining his ears. His heart was pounding. They were talking about Rosa. Use the special file, Victoria suggested, lowering her voice. The one we keep for delicate cases? Mitchell smiled, a smile that made James feel nauseous. I've already thought of that. I found out she has a grandson with a student visa. It would be a shame if something happened to his status, wouldn't it? The group laughed, and James felt his hands grip the delivery cart so tightly that his knuckles turned white. They weren't just harassing, they were blackmailing, threatening, and systematically ruining lives. And what about the security guard? Thomas asked. Michael Turner, right? I did a quick search and something doesn't smell right about his military background. Leave it to me, Mitchell answered. An anonymous call to the right people and, well, let's just say our friend Turner will have bigger problems to worry about. The group moved toward the elevators, their laughter echoing in the lobby like a dark omen. James stood still, his mind quickly processing the implications. The corruption was deeper than he'd imagined. It reached the highest levels of management. His radio crackled, startling him. Turner, urgent delivery on the 35th floor. James furrowed his brow. There hadn't been any scheduled deliveries, and the frequency of the delivery requests didn't seem right. Still, he decided to investigate. The elevator moved slowly, each floor heightening his anxiety. The 35th floor was oddly silent. The fluorescent lights flickered faintly, casting unsettling shadows across the empty hallways. Near the window that covered the entire wall, a solitary figure stood, gazing out at the city. Mr. Turner? Or should I say, Mr. Anderson? James felt his blood run cold. Jennifer Parker turned slowly, her heels echoing on the marble floor. For 20 years she had been his mentor, his closest advisor. The person who had guided him when he took the presidency after his father's traumatic death. Jenny? You know, James, you've always been predictable, she smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Even as a child running through the halls while your father worked late, you had that irritating idealism. How did you find out? Please, she chuckled softly. Do you really think anything happens in this building without my knowledge? I built this system, James. Every piece, every cog. While you played at being the nice CEO, I made sure the machine kept running. James felt decades of memories shifting, corrupting. Every piece of advice Jennifer had given, every decision necessary for business, all part of a larger plan. The files, the threats. Was it you? Naturally, she moved closer, her expensive perfume mixing with the air conditioning. Your father was an idealist like you. Equality, justice, opportunities for all, beautiful on paper, terrible for profits. When he died, she paused, studying James' reaction. Well, let's just say it was an opportunity to modernize things. The insinuation made James take a step back. My father, his accident. Accidents happen, James. Especially to people who ask too many questions. The world seemed to spin for a moment. James leaned on a nearby table, his legs suddenly buckling beneath him. You killed him? Jennifer laughed, the sound echoing through the empty floor. Me? No, darling. Let's just say, I created the right circumstances. The rest was a natural consequence. Why? Power, James. It's as simple as that. Your father was about to implement changes that would have cost the shareholders millions. Social programs, expanded benefits, real diversity policies. He would have destroyed everything we built. Jennifer opened her briefcase, pulling out an envelope. But enough of the old story. I have your resignation letter here, citing health issues. Sign it and you can retire rich and respected. Refuse? She let the threat hang in the air. James looked at the envelope, then at the woman who had been like a second mother to him for so many years. Slowly he pulled out his phone. You know, Jenny, you taught me a lot over the years. The most important lesson, always have a plan B. He hit play and her voice filled the room. I built this system, when he died. I created the right circumstances. Jennifer's face drained of color. I've recorded everything, James confirmed. In fact, I've been recording for days. Every conversation, every threat, every little conspiracy. And I'm not the only one. As if on cue, the elevator doors opened. Emily stepped out, flanked by 2 federal agents. Behind them, Rachel Thompson from HR, carrying a thick folder of documents. Impossible, Jennifer whispered. I controlled everything. Almost everything, James corrected. But you forgot one crucial thing, the people you considered invisible. The security guards, the delivery drivers, the cleaning staff. They saw everything, Jenny. And finally, someone was willing to listen to them. As the agents closed in, Jennifer made her final move. Your parents, James, there are things about them you don't know. Secrets that could destroy not just you, but the entire Anderson family legacy. James felt the weight of her words, but he stood firm. Maybe. But some truths need to come to light, no matter the cost. When Jennifer was taken away, James approached the window where she had been moments before. Below, police cars were starting to arrive. Soon the press would be there as well. Years of corruption, prejudice, and cruelty were about to be exposed. His phone rang. It was Rosa. Senor Turner. I mean, Senor Anderson. Her voice trembled. The police were here. They said that you... It's okay now, Senora Rosa, he gently interrupted. You're safe. Everyone is. When he hung up, another employee entered the room, Kevin, the security guard from the previous night. So it was true, he said, looking at James with a mix of awe and respect. The boss went undercover to find out the truth. Sometimes, James replied, we need to step down from the throne to see what's really happening in the kingdom. Anderson Enterprises would never be the same. But perhaps, James thought as he watched the sun rise over the city, this was exactly the change everyone needed. The silence on the 47th floor was almost palpable. In the luxurious boardroom, the air was thick with a mix of fear and apprehension. Senior executives, directors, and managers huddled together, whispering among themselves as they watched the TV vans multiply at the building's entrance. The nervous chatter was occasionally interrupted by the sound of notifications on their phones. The company's stock continued to plummet. James Anderson stood before the panoramic window, his silhouette framed against the morning sky. He had traded his delivery uniform for a crisp suit, but something in his posture was different. The power that had once radiated from him now felt heavier, darker, like a storm about to break. Mr. Anderson, Emily hurried in, her heels echoing on the marble floor. The situation is complicated. 3 major networks are live at the entrance. The board has been in an emergency call since the arrests and... She hesitated. We just received a subpoena from the public prosecutor's office. James nodded slightly, his reflection in the glass showing a face marked by sleepless nights and disturbing revelations. 20 years of lies and corruption had been exposed in a matter of days. The empire his father had built, and which Jennifer Parker had secretly corrupted, was about to face its moment of truth. How much damage so far? Richard Cooper, the interim CFO, asked, his voice trembling slightly. He checked his tablet again, wiping sweat from his forehead. The stock has dropped 15% since the initial leak. The major shareholders are in a panic, and 3 business partners have suspended pending contracts. James slowly turned around, his eyes scanning the room. He knew every face there, people he considered colleagues, some even friends. How many of them knew? How many silently participated in the system of oppression Jennifer had created? Damage? His voice was low, but filled with an intensity that made several executives shift uncomfortably in their chairs. Is that your concern, Cooper? The stock price? He walked toward the large conference table, resting his hands on its polished surface. The ring on his finger, a gift from his father when he took over the presidency, clinked against the tempered glass. Last night I met a woman named Rosa. He began, his voice gradually growing. She's worked here for 12 years. 12 years cleaning our offices while her grandchildren sleep, dreaming of a better life. Do you know what I found out about her? The silence in the room was now absolute. James continued. Rosa was threatened, humiliated, and almost lost her job because she spilled water on the floor. But that wasn't all. I found out she works while sick because she can't afford the medication for her diabetes. That her oldest grandson dropped out of college to help with the bills. That she cleans 3 floors by herself because cost-cutting have the staff. He paused, looking at each face in the room. How many of you knew her name before today? How many of you even noticed her existence? Margaret Collins, the director of marketing, cleared her throat uncomfortably. Mr. Anderson, we understand your concern. But we need to think pragmatically. The shareholders are demanding answers, the press is speculating about bankruptcy, and our competitors are circling like vultures. Pragmatically? James slammed his hand on the table, making several people jump. Like Jennifer Parker? She was very pragmatic, wasn't she? Manipulating, threatening, destroying lives in the name of profit. The door opened again and Rachel entered, carrying a stack of folders. Her normally calm face showed signs of shock. Sir, we found more documents in Mrs. Parker's office. You need to see this. James grabbed the first folder and began reading aloud, each word heavy with contained rage. Maria Sanchez, janitor, fired in 2021 after reporting sexual harassment. She received threats regarding her immigration status. Husband deported 3 months later. He turned the page. David Chin, junior analyst, transferred to a remote branch after questioning wage disparities. His family was followed for weeks until he quit. Daughter mysteriously lost her scholarship. Enough. Cooper stood up abruptly, his face red. This is the past. We can't change what happened. Can't we? James grabbed another folder. Aisha Williams, IT technician. Passed over for 5 promotions despite superior qualifications. Her locker was vandalized with racist messages. When she reported it, she was transferred to the night shift for operational reasons. He slammed the folder on the table, scattering photos and documents. This is not the past, Cooper. This happened last month. And do you know the worst part? We found similar patterns in every department at every level of the company. A system meticulously built to keep certain people in their place. James turned on the projector. A series of photos filled the wall: cleaning staff, security, maintenance, reception. Faces most in the room had never truly noticed. These are the people who keep Anderson Enterprises running. The people Jennifer and her accomplices considered disposable. Starting today, that changes. Rachel began handing out documents across the table. This is the new restructuring plan, she explained. Complete salary review, transparent promotion policies, an independent whistleblower channel, and a reparations program for affected employees. That's going to cost millions, protested a director from the back of the room. $17,200,000 in the first year, James confirmed. Every penny will come from executive bonuses. Starting with mine. The ensuing uproar was interrupted by Emily's phone. She answered, her face gradually paling. Sir, it's the board, her voice trembled. They're demanding your immediate resignation. They say your reckless actions are destroying the company's value. James smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. Tell them that if they want to fire me, they'll have to do it in person. And remind them that the press would love to know why they're trying to remove a CEO who exposed corporate corruption. Turning back to the room, he continued, everyone here has a choice to make. You can be part of the change, or you can look for a job elsewhere. There's no middle ground. And what if we refuse to participate in this crusade? Margaret challenged, venom in her voice. James picked up his phone and showed the last message from Jennifer. Some monsters are too big to be exposed to the light. Jennifer was wrong, he declared. There's no monster too big to be defeated when good people decide to do what's right. The question is, which side of history do you want to be on? At that moment, footsteps echoed down the hallway. The door opened slowly, revealing Rosa, Kevin, and other employees James had met during his investigation. They entered hesitantly, decades of conditioning making them seem out of place in this world of luxury. Ladies and gentlemen, James announced, meet the new members of the Ethics and Transformation Committee of Anderson Enterprises. They will oversee all the changes we'll be implementing. The shock on the executives' faces was palpable as the employees took their seats at the table. A table where some of them had only been before to clean or serve coffee. The operational hierarchy won't change, James explained, but the way we treat each other will. This company was built on the dream of equality and justice. It's time we honor that legacy. Emily approached again, holding a tablet. Sir, the first report has already come through the new channel. It's about? She hesitated, nervously glancing around the room, a director who's present. James observed the faces around him. Some visibly paled, others averted their gaze. Great, he replied. Let's start there. Rachel, prepare the adjacent meeting room. Emily, call our legal department. The new one, not the ones involved with Jennifer. As people began to move, James noticed Rosa discreetly wiping away a tear. For 2 decades, she had been invisible in that room. Now, she sat at the table, ready to help transform the company that had almost destroyed her family. Anderson Enterprises would never be the same again. The price would be steep, financial, personal, emotional. But as he watched that unlikely mix of people starting to interact, James knew that every penny, every moment of anguish would be worth it. The real reconstruction had just begun. The day dragged on in an endless sequence of testimonies and revelations. James had turned 3 meeting rooms into investigation centers, where specially designated teams were sifting through documents and interviewing employees. The stories that emerged grew more disturbing by the minute. Mr. Anderson, Rachel called, her voice trembling. We found something in Jennifer Parker's personal safe. James put down the documents he was examining. Rachel was holding a red folder different from the others. Her hands were shaking slightly as she handed it over. It's about your father, she hesitated. And about the night of the accident. The air seemed to vanish from the room. James took the folder carefully as if it might explode at any moment. Inside he found photos, reports, and most disturbingly, a series of emails dated the week of the accident that had taken his father's life. My God, he whispered as the truth unfolded before his eyes. The car accident that killed William Anderson had not been an accident. The emails revealed a meticulous plan involving not only Jennifer but also 3 members of the current board of directors. They had sabotaged the car after discovering that William was planning a complete company restructuring, including firing several executives involved in discriminatory practices. "There's more," Rachel said softly. "About your mother?" James raised his hand, asking for a moment. He needed to process one revelation at a time. His father, the man who had inspired him to be better, had not died in some random accident. He had been murdered for trying to do exactly what James was doing now. The door burst open. Emily entered, her face pale. "Sir, we have a situation in the lobby." Jennifer Parker was released on bail. James stood up so quickly that his chair toppled over. "How?" "Powerful connections," Emily replied. "She's here with 2 lawyers and members of the board." The main elevator was packed when James descended to the lobby. Employees crowded together, watching the scene unfold. Jennifer Parker, still elegant in her designer suit, was surrounded by men in suits. By her side stood Charles Montgomery, the board chairman, smiling arrogantly. "Oh, James," Jennifer opened her arms in a theatrical gesture. "Still trying to play the hero? How dare you come back here?" James' voice came out more controlled than he felt. "This is still my company as much as it is yours, darling," she smiled. "The board just appointed me interim CEO during your medical leave." A murmur rippled through the crowd. James felt the blood freeze in his veins. "Medical leave?" Charles Montgomery stepped forward, handing over a document. "We're concerned about your mental health, James. Your recent behavior, disguising yourself as an employee, making unfounded accusations, making reckless financial decisions, indicates a potential nervous breakdown." "Unfounded accusations?" James raised the red folder. "Like this one about the murder of my father?" Jennifer's smile faltered for a moment. Charles visibly paled. "More delusions," Jennifer sighed theatrically. "See? This is exactly what we're talking about. William Anderson died in a tragic accident. Reopening these wounds only shows your unstable mental state." "Unstable mental state?" A voice cut through the air. Rosa stepped forward from the crowd. "The only unstable one here is you, Miss Parker." Jennifer turned, her face contorting in disgust. "And who are you two?" "She's the woman you tried to destroy," Kevin interrupted, joining Rosa. "Just like you tried to destroy all of us." One by one, employees began to step forward. Janitors, security guards, technicians. People Jennifer had considered invisible for years. "You have no idea what you're doing," Jennifer hissed, her calm veneer beginning to crack. "You think you can take me down? I built this place." "No," James' voice thundered across the lobby. "You corrupted it. My father built it. And now?" He grabbed his phone, dialing a number. "Now you're going to pay for everything." The main doors opened. Federal agents entered, led by a middle-aged woman with a badge. "Jennifer Parker," announced the agent, "you are under arrest for the death of William Anderson and corporate conspiracy." "This is ridiculous," Charles protested. "We are the board of directors. You can't." "Actually, we can," James interrupted. "Those emails you and Jennifer exchanged in 2003? I wasn't the only child William Anderson was protecting." The agent removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes identical to James. "Hello, Jennifer. Do you remember me? The bastard daughter you tried to keep away from the company?" The shock on Jennifer's face was absolute. Sarah Anderson, the federal agent who had coordinated the entire investigation, was living proof that not all secrets stay buried forever. "Impossible," Jennifer whispered. You should be dead." "The accident in California? Another one of your plans that failed?" Sarah smiled bitterly. "Dad made sure I was protected. He sent me away but never stopped caring for me. And while you built your empire of lies, I built the case that would bring it all down." James watched his half-sister, whom he had only met 3 months earlier, when she came to him with the first evidence against Jennifer. Together they had planned every step of this operation. "Anderson Enterprises is going to change," James announced to the crowd. "Not because I decided so, but because you had the courage to stand up and fight for what's right." As Jennifer and the board members were led away in handcuffs, James realized that the real battle was just beginning. Rebuilding wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in decades, the company had a real chance of becoming what his father had always dreamed. Sarah approached him, smiling. "He'd be proud, you know. Of both of us." James nodded, watching Rosa and the other employees quietly celebrating. The truth had come at a high cost. Lives had been lost, others destroyed. But finally, after so long, justice was being served. The price of power, he realized, wasn't in the millions in bank accounts or the pompous titles. It was in the courage to do what was right no matter the cost. And that was a price he was more than willing to pay. 2 weeks after the arrest, James Anderson faced his biggest challenge yet. The shareholders' general meeting had been called, and the main auditorium of Anderson Enterprises was packed. The buzz of hundreds of nervous voices filled the room, mixing with the relentless clicking of photographers' cameras. "Shares have dropped 40% since the crisis started," Emily murmured, handing him the latest reports. "3 of the largest investors are threatening a class action lawsuit." James adjusted his tie, feeling the weight of the moment. By his side, Sarah, his newly discovered half-sister, was reviewing some notes. As a federal agent, she had coordinated the entire operation that exposed the corruption within the company. As William Anderson's secret daughter, she carried the same fiery desire for justice as her father. "Are you ready?" she asked, not taking her eyes off the papers. "No," James answered honestly. "But when has that ever stopped me?" The decisive moment arrived sooner than he expected. Barely had he stepped onto the stage when the first voice of protest rose. "Anderson, you've destroyed this company," shouted a shareholder from the front row. "Decades of work ruined by your moralism." Other shouts joined in, creating a cacophony of accusations and demands. James remained silent, observing. Among the angry faces of the investors, he noticed something interesting. In the back rows and galleries, employees from every department had gathered. Rosa was there, along with Kevin and dozens of others he had met during his undercover investigation. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice cut through the commotion with an authority that surprised even him. "You're right about one thing: I destroyed something. I destroyed a corrupt system that thrived on discrimination and fear. I destroyed a structure that protected criminals and punished the innocent." The silence that followed was absolute. James continued, "My father built this company with a dream, to create a place where everyone would have equal opportunities. Jennifer Parker and her accomplices turned that dream into a nightmare. And you?" He pointed at the more vocal shareholders. "You profited from that nightmare." "That's ridiculous," protested Harold Wellington, one of the largest investors. "We are businessmen, not criminals." "Not?" James gestured, and large screens descended from the ceiling. "Let's take a look at some interesting numbers." Sarah took control of the presentation. Graphs and tables began to appear, showing disturbing patterns. "In the last 20 years, she explained, Anderson Enterprises has fired 73% more minority employees than the industry average. The average salary of women in leadership positions was 45% lower than that of men in equivalent roles. And even more interesting, every cost-cutting measure that impacted frontline employees resulted in a direct increase in dividends for certain preferred shareholders." "That proves nothing," Wellington protested. "Those are just statistics." "Statistics." James grabbed a red folder, the same one containing the evidence about his father's death. "How about this? Emails proving that some of you not only knew about these discriminatory practices, but actively encouraged them." Wellington's face drained of all color. Other shareholders began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. "But today we're not here to dwell on the past," James continued. "We're here to decide the future." Emily handed out new documents to those present. "This is the new restructuring plan for Anderson Enterprises. It includes radical changes in hiring, promotion, and compensation policies. Yes, that means less profit in the short term. Yes, that means some of you will make less money." "That's unacceptable," someone shouted. "We have rights as shareholders." "You do," James agreed, "including the right to sell your shares. But before you make that decision, I suggest you look behind you." Everyone turned. In the galleries, hundreds of employees watched in silence. Real people with real lives who had suffered under the old system. "Every face you see there represents a story," James said, his voice slightly breaking. Rosa had to choose between buying medicine or paying for her grandson's school. Kevin was passed over for 5 promotions, despite having the best qualifications. Maria lost her husband to deportation because she dared to report harassment. The silence was deafening. James continued, "You have 2 options: you can be part of the change or you can leave. But the change will happen, with or without you." "That's blackmail," protested Wellington. "You can't." "Actually, I can," interrupted a new voice. Everyone turned to see an elderly man standing up in the back row. Richard Anderson Sr., James's uncle and the company's largest individual shareholder, hadn't appeared in public in years. "My brother William died trying to do what James is doing now," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I won't let his sacrifice be in vain." As the majority shareholder, I declare my full support for the new restructuring plan. The impact was immediate. Richard Anderson Sr. controlled 30% of the shares. With his support, the approval of the plan was practically guaranteed. Anyone else want to speak up? James asked, looking directly at Wellington. Silence was his answer. One by one, the shareholders began signing the documents to approve the new plan. Some did so with visible reluctance. Others seemed genuinely moved by the reality that had been exposed. When the last document was signed, applause erupted from the galleries. It started quietly but grew until it became deafening. Rosa was openly crying, embracing her colleagues. Kevin smiled, finally seeing a real opportunity for growth. James watched the scene with a mix of relief and determination. The hardest battle had been won, but the war for real transformation was just beginning. Sarah approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Dad would be proud," she whispered. "Of both of us," James replied, smiling at his sister. That night, long after everyone had left, James stayed in his office, gazing out at the city through the window. On his desk, the photo of his parents seemed to smile with approval. "We did it, Dad," he murmured. "We finally did it." The road ahead would be difficult. Rebuilding a company wasn't just about numbers and policies, it was about people, trust, and time. But for the first time in decades, Anderson Enterprises had a real chance to become what it should have been from the very beginning. A place where dreams weren't determined by the color of your skin or the last name you carried. The price had been high, reputations destroyed, fortunes lost, family secrets exposed. But as his father always said, some things have no price. And justice was one of them. 6 months had passed since the historic assembly that changed the course of Anderson Enterprises. Fall was painting the city in golden hues as James Anderson walked through the company's halls, observing the changes that had transformed not just the physical environment, but most importantly, the spirit of the place. Jennifer Parker's old office had been turned into a community space where employees at all levels could come together and share ideas. The walls, once adorned with expensive abstract art, now displayed photographs of employees and their families, telling stories of resilience and hope. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," Rosa greeted, now leading a facilities team with dignified working conditions. Her grandson had returned to college, thanks to the company's new scholarship program. "Good morning, Rosa," James replied, noticing how she walked taller now with more confidence. "How's the new scheduling system working?" "Perfectly," she smiled. "For the first time in years, I can spend weekends with my family." James continued his walk, stopping occasionally to chat with employees. Kevin, now head of security, was implementing a new monitoring system that prioritized employee safety without violating their privacy. Maria, who had managed to bring her husband back home thanks to the company's legal assistance program, was coordinating a support initiative for immigrant employees. On the 47th floor conference room, Sarah was waiting for him with the latest reports. As part of the agreement with the authorities, she had become the director of the new Ethics and Compliance Department. "The quarterly numbers are in," she announced, handing over a folder. "You're going to like what you see." James reviewed the documents, a smile forming on his face. After the initial drop, the company's stock had begun a steady recovery. Even more impressive were the other metrics. Employee turnover down by 70%, productivity up by 35%, and customer satisfaction at record highs. "The most interesting part," Sarah continued, "is the impact on the community. Other companies are starting to copy our policies on inclusion and transparency." "Dad always said a good idea is like a seed," James reflected. "Plant it in the right place, nurture it, and it spreads naturally." The morning went on with a series of meetings that were very different from the ones that used to take place in that room. The new ethics committee, made up of employees at all levels, presented proposals for continuous improvements. The reverse mentoring program, where younger or lower-level employees mentored executives on realities they had been unaware of, was showing surprising results. "Mr. Anderson," Emily called, gently interrupting one of the meetings. "They've arrived?" James checked his watch. It was time. In the main lobby, dozens of employees gathered for a historic moment. The inauguration of the William Anderson Memorial, a space dedicated not only to the memory of his father but to everyone who had fought for justice within the company. "My father believed that a company isn't made of buildings or profits," James began, his voice echoing through the lobby. "It's made of people, of dreams, of hope. For a long time we lost sight of that. We let power and greed corrupt his vision." He paused, looking at the attentive faces around him. "But you never lost hope. Even in the darkest moments, when the system seemed too big to change, you kept alive the flame of what was right." Rosa stepped forward holding a small plaque. It bore a quote from William Anderson: "True power is not in controlling others, but in helping them find their own strength." This memorial, James continued, is not just about the past. It's about the future we are building together. A future where no one has to choose between dignity and survival. Where talent and dedication matter more than inherited privilege. Sarah joined him, bringing an old box they had found in their father's office. Inside, along with photos and documents, were letters, dozens of them written by employees over the years, thanking William for small acts of kindness that had changed their lives. "We found out Dad kept a record of everyone he helped," Sarah explained, her voice thick with emotion. "Not to boast, but to remember what truly mattered." One of the letters was from Maria, Rosa's mother, who had worked at the company decades earlier. In it, she thanked William for paying for her medical treatment when no insurance would cover her pre-existing condition. "And this is how we honor his legacy," James concluded. "Not just with words or memorials, but with actions. Every fair policy, every opportunity offered, every life transformed is a continuation of his dream." The ceremony continued with heartfelt testimonies from both old and new employees. Kevin shared how the new merit-based promotion system had changed his outlook on the future. A young intern described how the mentorship program had opened doors she never imagined possible. At the end of the day, as the sun set over the city, James found himself back in his office. His parents' photo still smiled from the desk, but now it was joined by others. Photos of the employees, their families, their accomplishments. "You know," Sarah said, entering quietly, "sometimes I wonder if he knew this would happen one day. That his children would complete the work he started." "I think he knew someone would," James replied. "Maybe not us specifically, but someone who understood that power without purpose is empty." He picked up one last report, a company climate survey. The numbers were impressive, but what truly stood out were the comments. People describing how, for the first time, they felt proud to work there. How they could dream of a better future for their children. The price of power, James reflected, is not what we pay to get it, but what we do with it afterward. Anderson Enterprises had changed forever. It was no longer just a successful company, it was an example of how corporate power could be used for good, of how justice and profit didn't have to be mutually exclusive. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. Proving that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it's costly, is always worth it in the end. The sun finally set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Somewhere William Anderson was smiling, knowing that his legacy was in good hands. Friends, what did you think of this story of transformation and justice? Leave your thoughts in the comments. If you liked it and want more intense stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Life Stories channel. It helps our channel grow and allows us to bring more exciting adventures to you. See you next time.